Hello, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. I think it might be the first one of the spring. So hopefully we see springtime weather for those of us in the Northern Hemisphere. At least here in Boston, we hit snow. So always an auspicious beginning. Uh, anyhow, welcome, everyone.
There are cherry blossoms out in Vancouver,
Oh, very nice.
but it's still raining, so that's just normal. Hey, good to see you, Nick.
Good to see you all too.
First section of our meeting is announcements. I don't know if anyone has any announcements for this fortnight. If not, we move on to kind of the open questions section. Anyone from the community has questions or PRs they want to bring up, here's a pretty good time. I'll maybe mention a handful of PRs because they're always PRs. Jason, my coworker, puts them up. They're pretty small. Someone's up for reviewing the NPM packages one, that'd be great. I know Joe's got a bunch of PRs up. I keep kind of trying to look at them. Don't know if anyone else is up for that. Those are all probably pretty small, so I don't know if anyone's got any questions. Otherwise, we should probably just go forth into our agenda. Okay. First up, Windows code signing certificate renewal, e.g. it's been a year. So as Nick mentioned, his code signing cert is expiring. We're probably down to about 2 weeks now.
No, we should still have like 3 weeks, I would say, or like 20 days. But like sooner would be better than later, I'm sure. Everyone knows.
As I understand it, this does not affect anything already signed. Signed things are signed things. It doesn't particularly matter if the certs expire. Might be different if they get revoked for malware reasons, but not for...
That'll be different. They last until 2031. I was checking the certs today on the 5.2 release. So everything that's signed is fine. It's just that I won't be able to sign. We won't be able to sign things going forward. Yeah.
Yep.
And the current certs are in, do I remember correctly, they're in your name specifically?
Yes. Nick? Yeah, they are. And the reason we left them in my name is because we don't want to have the whole like Windows pop-up that says, hey, this isn't a trusted publisher, whereas like I've already got that in my name.
Maybe. I tried getting an Osquery cert.
Yeah.
And I ran into a lot of trouble. So Osquery, the foundation, is a what's the word? Sorry. It's like a series, it's a series 503c6, but it's basically it's like a sub thing of the Linux Foundation. So the Linux Foundation is a 501c whatever, and they can mint new 501c whatevers by basically issuing a proclamation. So, which is why our official naming is, sorry, I'm slightly unprepared for this. Let me go find my notes.
Something like a series of the Linux Foundation.
Yeah, exactly.
I think the point is that it's difficult for us to get a cert, right? That you're heading towards.
Well, maybe it might just mean someone else needs to try with a different vendor or the same vendor, and just maybe you get a different person and get lucky.
Okay. Yeah,
like that,
sure.
That's what I mean.
I'm down to try like 6 different vendors. I'll tell you, we got a cert for Fleet recently, and it was definitely a pain in the ass. But the biggest thing seemed to be that we needed a physical mailing address that lined up with something that was publicly associated with the company.
So there's a couple of threads I haven't pulled on. Let's find my notes here. The Linux Foundation is an LLC, and they create little new LLCs by basically putting down on a piece of paper that they've created a little LLC. So Osquery is a Series LLC entity. We are a separate legal entity. We have our own 501c6 and our own taxpayer EIN. We actually have a number. It has a lot of ones and twos in it. We have a mailing address. We might still have a phone number, although maybe I let Twilio expire it.
Where's our mailing address?
1 Letterman Drive, Building D, Suite D, 4700, San Francisco, California. It's the Linux Foundation's office.
Okay.
Should we publicly put that on our website in order to create that association that Zach was
Yeah,
talking about?
I wonder if we can put. I have a feeling I can look at what vendor we use, and it makes me think if we put that address and we can on our website, and then we can receive mail at that address, we may be able to get through the verification process from that vendor.
So the thing I ran into with the vendor I worked with, right, is I have the set of legal founding docs, which are less extensive than one might like. They're basically, here's the Linux Foundation's incorporation, and then here's a piece of paper saying that we exist. And when I worked with, I forget who I was trying to work with, maybe Komodo, Komodo's verification team was like, no, you're clearly the Linux Foundation. We'll give you a cert that says you're the Linux Foundation. And I was like, I'm not the Linux Foundation. Don't do that. So it did not feel like the correct thing. So they were willing to give me a cert for the Linux Foundation, but not for Osquery.
I think that the vendor that we worked with did not require any documents of like about the business. It really was just about our address being associated with like the public entity. I mean, definitely this system is not working well.
Do you want to hear how broken this is? Because I had to do the same thing for DigiCert before I could renew last year. They said that you need to have your address be physically linked somewhere to an internet or like something that I can search. So I made a Google business that was my home address, and I put that down for the Osquery signing cert, and they said that was legit. And as soon as I got the certs issued, I deleted the business and the address and everything. So like, it's not that hard to get it. It's just a matter of what loopholes you want to jump through to make it happen.
Yeah. Okay. And thank you, Nick. That I just looked. It was DigiCert we got ours from.
Yeah.
So maybe we should just try DigiCert for Osquery.
We could try.
Sure. We just need an address. I think the thing that I want to try to get out of this is, do I want to try to get this cert renewed? How much time do we need to try to get this Osquery signing cert? Because like, I think another piece, I think the question we really want to answer is, are we ready to switch over the Windows signing to be Osquery or just somebody that isn't me? Which I'd like to do that, but I'm curious how we are feeling about
the discussion as I remember it. So in macOS land, there are people who pin the certificate signing. So changing certificate signing on macOS is a breaking change.
But not on
I'm not aware of anyone that pins it on Windows.
Yeah. So the only fear I have is, like I was saying earlier, if we change the signing certificate and it gets smart screened. So like what I would almost advocate for is we get the Windows cert now and we start having whoever can help us push this out to their fleets to get enough installs that Microsoft is like, okay, we trust this cert, and we get past the smart screen stage. And maybe we just keep using my cert for yet one more year until we're in a place that we're comfortable doing the hot swap. How do we feel about that?
I would just cut over.
Nick, what's the renewal cost?
$500, I think, ish.
I mean, okay, I'd say let's just pay for that renewal so that we don't have like this 20-day deadline coming up.
Yeah.
We have the money in the Osquery account. There's a process for you submitting the receipt and getting reimbursed from what is it called? Community Bridge or wherever our funding is. We can look publicly at what the balance is.
Sure.
That's my feeling is let's just do it. Then we'll have then we won't be forced to do something like urgently, but I think that we should cut over to a cert that's has the name Osquery in it. Yes. But
so I like this idea, even if like I don't want us to have to deal with urgency and like making poor decisions because we were forced to on a cert expiring.
So
I'm just going to renew it, and then we can figure this out. But we need to prioritize it, so that way next year we're not having the same conversation kicking the can down the road.
So my observation, I don't feel concerned about the smart screen thing because I think it's going to be obnoxious and annoying, and I think we just have to rip the Band-Aid off. And I think the first time Collide did it, it didn't take that long.
Yeah, I think it's like 1,000 executions or 1,000 installs or something like that. Like the number's not too big, I don't think.
It's not published, and we hit it pretty fast.
Not that high. Yeah,
yeah. So I don't feel too worried about the smart screen thing, especially if we're like, look, we changed. You might get a smart screens prompt. Sorry. I've also had mixed reports on whether or not renewal triggers a new smart screen. I can find docs saying yes and docs saying no. Empirically,
but, we've renewed multiple years and signed with new certs.
Look, I know.
Yeah,
and I have this wonderful example of it seems to work fine, and I can also find docs and people being like, it doesn't work at all.
So
I've never seen it.
I know the certificate issuance process is broken and it's an extortion racket, but that means if you pay them more, that you can get a certificate with extended validation.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
And then you won't get hit with the smart
is
screen.
only $1,000.
It's less than that, I think.
Oh, really?
Okay.
I mean, we're talking about maybe $500.
But that's what I paid for an Authenticode cert.
Well, maybe yours is
well. Cert's also expensive. So Authenticode certs are about 100, and EV certs are about 300 to 1,000, depending.
I thought they were 100 too. I wasn't gonna care. I was just gonna renew the cert. But last year it was like $500.
It's a DigiKey. The problem with EV certs is that EV certs are mandated to be delivered into HSMs. So either they'll ship you a USB fob.
Oh yeah,
and
or
I don't think we want to figure out the cloud thing. There's now some hookups for cloud stuff, but I haven't run that riddle trail for cloud.
You can get an HSM in AWS, but it's quite expensive.
You can also do software HSMs now, which are not quite expensive, but there's some work to figure out how to make it all work.
Do we need HSM backed attestation for this? Because I really feel like the flow we have. No. I understand if we go with the EV cert. I'm saying, is there a use case why someone would want that? Because what we have with Authenticode and the GitHub pipelines is amazing.
There are two use cases where you want an EV cert. One of them is to bypass all smart screen things, which we've generally said isn't enough to push us over the edge. And the other one is if you're running system extensions. Or kernel extensions, or whatever Windows calls them.
That's.
Well, we don't do
that.
My
2 cents is that should be on the vendor or whoever it is that's doing that. Let them deal with the. Yeah.
Well, so we don't do this. If at some point I will probably run the EV riddle trail connected to cloud HSMs, connected to GitHub for Collide. If I ever do that, then I will have a software stack, and I will advocate we do it too. But until I have that software stack,
if it's easy, I just still think that should be something that's on whoever actually has that use case. Because I don't think the generic user using Osquery needs those levels of attestation. I think an Authenticode cert is sufficient.
So I agree it's sufficient, but I kind of am mostly saying if we have a software stack that works, we may as well do the nicer thing. We don't have the software stack.
Yeah.
And let's not do it.
Yeah. Cool.
I'd advocate for wrapping up this conversation now, and not that we can't talk about it more later, which I think we should talk about all of our migration issues later. But I just checked, Osquery has almost $4,000. So Nick, if you buy that cert, you can be reimbursed directly from Osquery. And unless anyone objects, I'd say let's please do that, and then let's figure out the migration path.
I'm good with it. The forcing function helps us get stuff done sometimes, but
so has this circuit ever been renewed in the past?
Yeah,
1 year ago.
Well, I've renewed this since 2018. We've been using this cert that I've got since 2018.
So what I've heard or what I've read is that for a standard certificate, the reputation from Microsoft Smart Screen starts over when you renew. Is that true?
I really don't.
I've seen it both ways.
How could it?
So Mike, I've seen docs saying both that it resets and that it doesn't reset, and I have seen person reports that it is fine and that it's not fine. So I've just chalked it all up to who knows.
I've never had a report of Osquery being smart screened
Okay. Well,
in the
then,
public, in the wild.
in our experience,
the
it's not.
biggest
Okay. That's good to know. But that was something that if I had read that, and if it were true, then it would mean that there were no advantage to renewing. But if that's your experience, then I guess continue renewing.
Well, the advantage to renewing is that it's a path we know how to do quickly.
Yeah,
yeah.
that's the thing that I would say is, I'll tell you, when we did it with DigiCert recently, like they mailed us a verification code that we didn't receive the first time, and who knows how long it will take us to get this code if it's going to Linux Foundation office, and that kind of thing. So my reason for renewing now would be, if we want to be able to release Osquery still beyond 20 days from now, we run a risk of not being able to do that if we don't get this renewal.
Let's just do it.
There's one more way to avoid smart screen is you can submit your file to Microsoft for malware analysis. Did you know about that?
I have not found that to work in Collide.
Okay.
Sounds like Mac OS notarization.
Kind of.
No.
Yeah.
It's not.
So, I'll share the link here.
I'm definitely curious to look.
So macOS notarization is about an actual attestation, which is X509 backed, which you can then staple onto the resulting things. Microsoft's is a somewhat unclear form, which basically says, submit this in case you're getting false positives. I have not found it to make any difference in the things I sign for Collide. I do occasionally submit through it, and it basically just feels like a black hole. It's like the presentation is all like, submit this to our engineers for analysis and false positives.
If we submit it, it's zero cost, and if it doesn't work, then oh well.
Yeah. Anyhow, so Nick, you'll renew. You should be able to submit to Expensify. I might have to invite you to that account.
All right. We can figure all that out later. I can absolutely take a $500 hit for the moment, and I'm going to work on just trying to get the cert into the GitHub pipeline as quickly as possible, so we don't have to worry about this. And then, action items. I think I do want to try to push us to get the Osquery, like, as cool as I think it is that my name is around the world. I would really love to get Osquery to be the one doing this.
Okay, I will. One of us, maybe me, maybe someone else, will try and pick that up again.
Well,
then.
Seth, I'll work with you, or like whoever would like to help me do this. I'll work with whoever. I'm happy to allocate time to get myself out of this pipeline, or just not be in the way of people. Right. I don't mind maintaining the cert. I'm happy to be on the account and help do this every year because I know how to do it. But like, it needs to be Osquery and not me.
No, I think we all agree.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks, y'all.
Next up, Osquery 5.3 release.
Yep. So we have an issue tracking the packages that need to be updated. Actually, there's a comment under that issue specific to the ones that need to be updated immediately. And I think remaining are libelfin, librpm, and libudev, and we're removing libelfin. And so I guess what are the PRs for those, and where are they?
Okay, so the libelfin PR I did approve, although I sort of commented that I don't know if we ever want to bring the LIEF library in, which was a thing Puffy Sid was working on once upon a time. Or if we just want to say whatever, the ELF tables are gone for now and move on with life.
I wouldn't wait for those. I would first remove, and then we evaluate, if it makes sense to add them with leaf.
Seems reasonable. I did approve 7524, which is the libelfin one. The other one is RPM, which is 7529, which I did also approve a while ago.
Yeah.
So
Should we merge
y'all
those?
could click merge.
All right. I will click and merge. Let me go do that.
Yeah, maybe I know that you saw there are a couple of big patches, mainly because the previous version of librpm was providing an option to that this is the build system was providing an option to disable the need of linking to Lua, since we do not use in any case Lua because we are not executing anything with librpm, etc. Now they have removed this option, and so we are removing with a patch code that depends on Lua so that we can build librpm without Lua. And yeah. Well, yeah, that's it.
And those are fine. I guess the other thing you list in this ticket, Mike, is libudev.
Yeah. Do we have a PR for that, or we kind of blocked?
No, no, because we found that so a couple of issues. Well, first of all, we found that all the CVEs are not actually impacting libudev itself, and they are impacting systemd. Now, the thing is that the version of libudev we bring in, although it is in the systemd repo, it's from a version where systemd didn't exist yet. So scanners are finding those CVEs as present because they think, yeah, I mean, given that it's older than like the first version of systemd, Snyk is still counting all the CVEs that ever existed on systemd and up as being present in libudev, but it's not true. None of those touch libudev. So we decided to, for now, de-escalate the updating of that library, and especially because now that libudev depends on systemd, there's no way basically to compile it in a way that is compatible with multiple versions of kernel, of distro version basically. So it's really tied to the system, to the kernel, and to the systemd version. I have simply I've seen done a couple of tests and seen that the version we have now, although old, seems still to work with CentOS 6 and up to the latest kernel I tried, Arch Linux. So I think that for now we can keep that version. We should be in the future still explore a way maybe to remove that because, change that because it's an unmaintained library. But yeah, for now there isn't any security issue. And this is the whole picture.
Okay, so the scanner detects a version incorrectly, or does it detect CVEs that do exist but don't exist for Osquery?
So I'm not sure. So I suspect that it is using like simply the commit ID for that source code, like the SHA. So clearly, if it's using that commit or ID or basically the date of the version of libudev, any CVEs that has been found from there on, since the library shares the same repository where also systemd is, then Snyk is reporting all the CVEs that are present in the repository. So it's not limiting in any way its findings to a specific folder, it seems, at least, because it wouldn't make sense otherwise that it would find those CVEs, because again they are all CVEs on systemd, which systemd doesn't exist in the in the source code we have. So
it is strange how it works. I believe we also have SQLite 3 laying around at vulnerable versions that we are not using, but Snyk was not reporting them.
So Alessandro has looked at each of these CVEs individually, right? Just to make sure that they're all in the service and not the library. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just making a comment on the GitHub thread that we've looked at these all, done due diligence.
I don't think it is understood the SQLite one, but I think that SluteKit has well, there is a source code there that you could compile, and it's a version of SQLite, but we are not compiling it in.
Yeah, what I meant is that it is strange. It is associating the libudev that we are using to systemd, while at the same time failing to find a SQLite that is just laying there. So
I see.
I'm not exactly sure what is the logic that Snake is following to scan folders. Also, an additional note on scanning for dependencies. The best approach, if there is anyone hearing us, is to do not clone recursively, but instead rely on CMake to clone the dependencies that are needed on that platform. Because otherwise, you will find CVEs for libraries that you're not actually using on all the platforms.
So probably people that need to hear that won't be listening to the office hours. That's why communication is the next agenda item. If we're good about checking on the updates for 5.3, and it sounds like we basically have what we need to cut a 5.3 release, but we can look at that. We could talk about the need to put some of this information into a publicly findable location.
Before we go into there, I just want to make sure we close out the 5.3 stuff.
Okay.
So we think our dependencies are now, we don't think we need to upgrade libudev. We think all of the security updates are now done. So we think we could cut 5.3 whenever. I wouldn't mind getting some of the very briefly mentioned PRs earlier in. So
before the next release, I was wondering if we could drop the shortcut files table. The parser that we have in there is problematic.
We talked about this, right?
Briefly. We only mentioned it.
I think you and I did somewhere, right? I think we concluded that the functionality is interesting, but that the parser isn't great. And there are Microsoft parsers maybe for some of this, but they're not being used. So either someone would have to convert this table to use reasonable parsers, or we should drop it.
So the table itself is used to parse link files in, let's say, a forensic manner. And so it doesn't really map to the functionality that we would have with readlink. So if we are interested in reading the link, we can implement this somewhere, maybe in the file table, I don't know. This is mostly just a forensic use case. And so I don't think we have feature parity anywhere else.
Are you advocating we do this for 5.3 or for 5.4?
I would do this as soon as possible, since it's most likely vulnerable.
Okay. I think you convinced me of this like back around 5.1 or 5.2 even, and we just haven't dealt with it. So I think if you want to put up a PR.
Okay.
Yeah, so I don't know, I guess maybe we'll try and chat on code review or core or Sumber General or something to see if there's any other things we want to try and cram into 5.3 before we cut that release, and aim to cut it in the next couple of days.
Yeah, there is something else I mentioned that we never talked about, but I think you left you left a comment there. The SSD hash. This is this is another library which I've noticed that it's not maintained anymore. There are a couple of crashes reported, and no CVEs, but still, it is possible to provide an input which causes a crash. And so it's a bit of a liability right now, for sure. So I was suggesting to remove it. The SSD, we only use it for calculating a hash in the hash table among the other one we calculate.
So I agree with the premise that we should remove unmaintained code that is likely to be crashy and full of liabilities, but 100%. When I was trying to read about what SSDeep was, it appears that it is a fuzzy hashing algorithm, which is used by like VirusTotal somewhere, although maybe not anymore, and other kinds of like, very forensically oriented stuff. It seems like a really useful thing, but I can't find a lot of libraries for it right now. Like I can't tell if that ecosystem has just moved private, or if it has, moved over to like Rust or Go, or it's weird. Like it seems like useful functionality, and the library is like almost an unmaintained PhD research paper.
Yeah.
So I'm curious what other people think about that.
Are we using a library that implements that SSD hashing?
Yeah.
Yep.
But that library is crashing.
It's unmaintained.
And has,
Yeah, okay.
has a non-crash.
I mean, maybe like I just did a quick look and I see there is like an SSD library for Go. Like we could build an extension table for it if people really need it. And then at least we have memory safety.
I mean, we can always build extensions. It just, of all the functionality we talk about dropping, like LLDP and LFIN and now SSDeep is the only one that gives me pause. And that might be my bias, and that just because I understand it and I'm like, well, why would you ever want libelfin? But from where I am, SSDeep isn't a thing I use, but like it's a thing I understand wanting. So I wish we had an alternative, and I don't know that we do. I mean, maybe the answer is we drop it because it's unmaintained and we have to make hard choices. And if it becomes maintained, maybe we bring it back as a like fuzzy hash library, so it won't be quite as slow on a join against the hash table.
Yeah, it's not like dropping it means that we don't ever want it back. And I understand that still dropping it and not finding a replacement immediately, it's an issue, but still, if we are not able immediately to find a substitute, I would still think it's better to drop it anyway and say we will put it back when we find a better solution.
Is this SSD from Jesse Kornblum at Facebook?
Probably.
Yes.
I was going to say, for what it's worth, we use SSD internally, but not a lot. Like, I think there are use cases for it. It's an incredibly valuable tool, but if it's causing issues and like it's breaking things and it's not maintained, I would ask for a champion to maintain it before we can consider bringing it back in. That's just my 2 cents.
Could you ask the people at Facebook? Like,
Jesse probably is done with this. I don't think he's coming back to the security space, but like he did this long tangent of converting to software engineer, and then he was working on Osquery for a while for the internal fork, and then he dropped that and he moved to some other things. But I think his days of SSD might be behind him.
Well, I'm wondering if Facebook uses a different library at this point, or if they're like where that's gone.
I have no idea. I can go and take a look if we're still using his versions of it, but I would imagine we're using whatever is standard, whatever like externally available.
Well, I hear there's some crashes in it, so you might want to reevaluate that.
But again, like I don't think a huge number of people are actively using it, right? Like we compute the SSD for it, but I don't know how we're doing that. I don't know libraries, and not a lot of people go digging for SSD values anymore. But I'll take it as a follow up to ask him and hit him up and see if he's planning to continue maintaining it, or at least let him know that there's crashes in it.
Yeah, whatever library we're using hasn't had like merges in a few years, and there's clearly.
Apologies for being completely out of the loop on this, but do we have a GitHub issue that I can point him at where the crashes are reported?
The crashes are reported on the upstream repository of SSDeep. I think I don't recall the nickname. I think they answered to one of them, but it was like maybe 1 year ago or more.
Okay.
There is a PR open for one of them, and
okay,
I'll just
let him know, and maybe he can go and do digging. Maybe he can figure it out.
Yeah, I don't. It's so. The other thing is that I don't. Maybe I haven't found them, but I don't also see many tests there, and I don't want. Yeah, sorry, I don't want to. But and say anything against it in that way, but. Yeah, I was thinking this because if we if it's just a matter of fixing a couple of crashes, and then we have tests, and we can sort of maintain them ourselves.
Right. Sure.
Yeah, that was my other issue.
I feel like this is just one of the things where we have to make the hard choice, and the correct answer is probably to drop it, because having that kind of liability doesn't feel good. And I'd love it if it became maintained and we brought it back. But until it does, I don't know if anyone wants to take the counterpoint on that. Okay, one's taking the counterpoint, which means we think the hard choice is to just drop it and be a little sad, and if enough people make noise, maybe we'll reevaluate. Thumbs up, thumbs down.
I'm on board.
Okay, I will attempt to find that in our repo and thumb it for you, Stefano. Do you actually happen to know what that pull request number is, Andy?
Oh, there is only a blueprint.
It's only a blueprint. Okay, do you want to do that for 5.3?
Actually, maybe I don't recall if no. Actually, there is a blueprint from another community contributor. It's 7525. They saw.
Yep. There's a pull request.
Yeah.
Okay. Stefano, if you want to sanity check this, I assume this is not Trail of Bits work.
No.
Okay. Yeah. If I'll assign this to you, if you review it and merge it, I think our conclusion here is that okay. I will comment on the ticket as well. Okay. Mike, communication around security advisories.
Yeah, so it's sort of switching back to what we were discussing, but we have a GitHub issue related to the current problem of updating the dependencies, and that will be an ongoing thing. And we're also talking about not updating certain libraries that are flagged as being CVEs but aren't. And I guess there is no place that we can point people to assure them that they're looking at false positives. So we have a security assurance document that might be an appropriate place. We have the advisories page. People look there and they don't see anything, and so they think they have to report something to us. And anyway, if we could say like, no, we looked at these. Here are the investigation notes. We have something like that in a Google Doc now, but I was proposing we put something on either the wiki or the website or the repo where people think is best.
Yeah, and by the way, I looked at Sneak and spoke to their sales team, and they have a nice reporting function that looks like it would be great for this, but you can't make it publicly accessible.
Could we do monthly dumps of the report into our repo, or is that like against the license?
It's possible we could do something like that. The other thing is that it's going to be very expensive for this to be a manual process as well. It's going to end up costing like over $1,000 a month, and then to still have to do a manual process seems pretty unfortunate.
Yeah.
So if we talk about, so whatever we do for security scanning, I think this is true for Sneak as well as anything else, we will need to maintain a list of things that we attest that we are not vulnerable to, which is the work Alessandro did. It's the thing Mike's advocating for. And I think the format of that might change as we develop tools. I don't have a big preference about what we do. I don't think the wiki is a good choice. Putting it into the security or assurances doc seems like an easy first pass, and we can go from there.
Okay. We don't like the wiki because it's not part of the repo.
We don't really make heavy use of wikis, and wikis don't feel like they have the same kind of audit logs on them. The GitHub ones do because they're just Git under the hood. But it just feels
Mike, when you say wiki, are you talking about like readthedocs.io, or are you talking about GitHub wiki figure?
You know, my thought was GitHub's wiki, but you're right. The people that the only wiki that people are familiar with is the Read the Docs one. So maybe that would be better. You know, the assurance.md file is also there and sort of relevant, and so maybe that's fine.
I'm good with whatever.
Okay, so I'll make it an issue in a repo to do this, and we will track it.
And I'd be fine with it going on to a new page in the Read the Docs wiki or doc, whatever we want to call it. I think that I'd advocate for it's as accessible as possible. And I think if it's going in assurance.md, it might be less accessible than on those docs, which I assume are what most people look at. And that's what's usually found by Google searches.
Found by Google searches? Okay. Yeah.
Glancing at our docs, there isn't a section on security. So creating a security doc there that mirrors the content or links back to security.md and assurance and whatever the assurances is, and has a list of like evaluated CVEs seems probably not like a lot of work. I say, not volunteering.
Okay, so I'll create a security section in the Read the Docs wiki that points to the assurance file, and there's already quite a bit there. So
yeah, I would just point at that or copy it or move it. You know, whatever you think makes sense. As long as it looks reasonable, I'll fund it.
the original motivation for the assurance file was that I guess certain kinds of project scoring, scorecards want to see one, and so I wouldn't move it or remove it because it's there in the Git repo. But yes, I will add to it and point to it.
Okay, tag me for review. I'll do that one.
Okay.
Okay. So a couple more agenda items. Caching users and groups on Windows. This is a PR Stefano put up, which I flagged for broader discussion because it's actually, I think, a fundamental change in how Osquery works, and I thought we should talk about it in a larger group.
This is amazing. I've never seen this before, but this is awesome.
Which PR 7516?
That's right.
Okay. Well, I couldn't decide what I thought.
I mean, I think I'm just thrilled to see like some attempt to mitigate the Windows domain controller user enumeration issue. Like I don't think I'd advocate for this becoming common across Osquery, but like this is such a fundamental thing that Osquery should be able to do effectively, and it's caused people trouble for so long that I'm pretty on board with the idea.
Yeah, some of the decision of going to that route was that I mean, from the other discussion we had, like about changing the other tables, schema, etc., it would have been, I think, too many steps change to arrive to the point, finally arrive to the point of unacceptable performance. Because we had really had to touch several schemas of several tables to be able to have like the to have something like the SID or the the SID for users and the SID for groups be used for indexing and be an optimized constraint, plus all those other issues with UAD and GAD, which do not identify a single user or group, etc., etc. So yeah, with this PR, I decided to focus first on performance and what was achievable without changing schema. So although the backend works differently, and in some cases, obviously, the data, how the data is provided is different. For the most part, it's the same. It's the same data as before, and again, the schema is the same, etc., etc.
So the thing that struck me about it, I guess a thing I really like is it feels innovative. Like it's a thing we haven't done in Osquery, so that's kind of neat. I think it's good, but I definitely wanted to flag that kind of change to the group. If I think about it as a materialized cache, there's definitely some interesting questions around, like, would we ever want to expose some kind of materialized caching functionality to end users, right? Like you can, inside a query or inside the configuration, basically create a temp table, populate it, and then work with it. And at Collide, we've done some sort of extensions around Launcher that go even further down that route. There's this interesting thought in my head of like, would we ever want to carve out something in the config to be like, define a materialized table here and a schedule to update it on? I wouldn't say let's block this on deciding that or anything. Just kind of, where would it go?
I think
it's interesting for sure. I agree, and I agree with not blocking this. Sorry, go ahead, Stefano.
No, I was just. I mean, so there are two parts to this PR though, because there is the cache is there to avoid having to regenerate data, obviously, each time. But here, the regenerate data specifically means, again, using Windows APIs to gather user or groups information, and so cause the LSAS process to consume some CPU. But additionally, this also, so I've also implemented constraints optimization that I could implement, because at this point I was not, so the query is not anymore talking directly to the Windows APIs, which do not support UAD and GAD as constraint, basically, as optimized constraint. So now instead, since I have a cache, which I can construct an index on whatever I want, basically, not saying that it's performant doing that on any column, but I could on UAD, GAD. Now it is also more performant on the Osquery side, because again, there was a second problem. Because we found a partial solution with the CTE as materialized, or using the heuristic of Osquery, SQLite deciding to cache the results from the groups table so that the groups table did not have to regenerate the data at each time it is queried.
Right.
But the issue is that then SQLite has to do the filtering multiple times on all the rows, and so that was, although the time has gone, the ETA of the query, the join query, has gone down like from something like 29 hours, and my target was 15,000 users and 15,000 groups. So from 29 hours has gone down to like a couple of minutes. But the issue is the issue was that Osquery would use 100% of CPU in that 2 minutes or more, and so that was a bit too much. Well, 100% of a core, to be more specific. Because it's not multi-threaded. So
yeah, it's still like unacceptable performance. And I think the other thing is that also requires that the user like writes the query using this, CTE with the materialized flag and everything. And I think it's just like, this just seems so fundamental that like querying groups and users should work. And you should be able to just write a query that works like it's expected to. That like whatever magic we have to do under the hood to make that work, like to me seems like worth it.
Here's another question. I haven't done any research, so feel free to just tell me this is crazy or isn't going to work. SQLite, when you write tables, has a create and an access function. I'm blanking on the name of the second. Like virtual tables and SQL, using the SQLite, have both like a generate and a create or something. And inside Osquery, we set those calls to be the same, and all of our tables are ephemeral tables.
Oh, connect and create.
Connect and create. So I almost I wonder. I think if I remember your PR right, it works by actually creating a cache of this and then keeping the ephemeral table, and the ephemeral table generate code talks to your cache. So like, would we do better working inside the SQLite connect and create using non-ephemeral tables?
No. So this is more. This is more like it's not using SQLite basically to do this. There's no real SQLite table cached. It's the data itself in binary form. Well, what is not necessarily a string is in binary form cached. So in a sense, it's also less memory intensive. So that's another plus. I mean, yeah, my very first test was actually to cache the entire query data thing, which represents a table. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure right now what would be the an improvement or anything with the connect or using the connect create method. Not that can't be used in other.
It would be a different model. I think it would be a more SQLite model, and whether that's a win or not, I don't know. I haven't written any code. So
So the question is, again, I'm wondering, would you use that to keep the cache there, or do you want to change the format of the cache? Because
I would consider moving the cache into SQLite, because I think create would instantiate the table the first time, pull all the data in, and then create some you could create some background thread off of create to keep it fresh, and then connect would just connect to it. I'm not totally sure. I haven't read the APIs. I don't know that it might not work. It might be slower. But a little bit, right? If you're creating an in-memory structure and indexing into it, you're basically recreating SQLite.
Oh yeah, I mean, so again, the only thing is, like I would use those connection, like those function as an entry point to decide, when to create the cache, maybe yeah, where and when to reuse it. But basically, all the rest of the code I would say that it has to kind of stay the same, because it's again more performant because it uses less memory to store data.
Other question: do you want to try and get this merged into 5.3?
No, so no, it's not a priority for 5.3 or a blocker for 5.3. But yeah,
I mean,
We want to because it has been a long running
but
thing.
yeah.
so I think I looked at it and concluded that someone with deeper C knowledge should look at it. But I don't think I saw anything wrong from what I could tell. So if Zach wants to review and approve it, that's like half an approval from me and approval from Zach. It's
I definitely approve of the concept, but I don't have the time to read all of the C++ code. So if Alessandro or Charvel or someone else can do that and feels good about the code, then it works for me.
okay. So, I mean, if we manage to get it reviewed, then we can merge it.
And I think getting it into the new release would be great. I
Go
mean,
into a new release at some point.
Yeah, getting it into the one that's coming soon.
I don't think there's much else to say here. I'm curious about implementation details, but I wouldn't block this on that. Sounds like there's broad approval and someone should review the C code. And then we should merge it. We're about out of time. I had a question. I ran into a weird corner case debugging. I don't know if people want to talk about it now or just call it on time.
I'm willing to keep going because the agenda is pretty big, but
I gotta drop. Thanks, all. Bye.
okay.
Zach, you around for 15 minutes?
I can stick around a bit longer, yeah.
Okay. So one of the things that we find happens in our customer base is that people will use Migration Assistant to like copy one machine to another, or somehow an Osquery database will show up on two machines. And we can detect this server side and we can issue a node re-enrollment. But when we do, the Osquery identifier doesn't change and we get stored logs. Although the stored logs might be coming out of launcher. I haven't dug that deeply. So one of the things I was sort of thinking about is when we say that when we tell Osquery to do it, when the TLS server tells Osquery to do a re-enrollment, this will cause Osquery to get a new node key. But there's no way to query that. There's no way to put that into a decorator. So there's this interesting split between like the only really server controlled piece of data is that node key, and there is no way to create a solid association inside decorators or log entries or any kind of stored record. So I was curious if other people have any thoughts about this, if other people have played with anything in this space.
Haven't we, like, I think this is similar to a talk we have done in the past about duplicated node keys being
It's
sent
similar.
to
So one of the things we've talked about is the way host identifier works, and how Osquery has several host identifiers. One of them can be server set. So you can actually set a server controlled host identifier in the config file. I forget the name of the option offhand. It's sort of weird. Like you go digging through the code and you find these weird things. But what I feel like I want, and I'm not doing a great job of explaining it, is at the time the server sets a node key, I think the server should also be able to set some public piece of information, right? Because you want to set like a public and private thing at the same time, and then you know they go together. Whereas if you set the node key as a private and then the config file for the remainder, those go out of sync from each other because the config file does not come in at the same time the node key does. So there's like a race condition there.
Is the host identifier an insufficient public identifier?
The host yes. The host identifier has
Or
several
why?
problems with it.
I know there are problems, but I guess in this specific instance, I'm curious to understand.
One, which host identifier? So we have the host ID, which is supposed to be a hardware UUID, but is buggy because we don't reset it. So it gets cached in the database. So if you like swap a logic board out or copy a database to a new host, you will still have the prior host's UUID. So you've got that weirdness. The Osquery identifier, I think I have that term right, is, as far as I know, supposed to be a unique GUID assigned to like that Osquery instance. It doesn't get regenerated on node re-enrollment. So you have all of these identifiers that are basically created once at database creation time and then never recreated. So there's weird stuff that kind of shakes out of that. Does that answer your question, Zach?
This has always been a challenge, and it's something that we still encounter at times with Fleet. I think one thing that we've done that's been helpful to some extent is we've made it so that Fleet can say, we're going to ignore what was provided by Osquery as the host identifier and look specifically at the hardware UUID or the Osquery UUID, the one stored in the database.
And we do something similar. And my warning to you and all future listeners is that those are inadequate. Horribly, horribly inadequate. Because if you copy an Osquery database from one host to another host, they won't change.
Yeah, that's the big problem. And so, yeah, I mean, the other thing is, so if you rely on the Osquery database, you have the problem where if you clone a VM image or do any other sort of migration that results in that database being copied, then the system sees all the hosts as the same one. On the other hand, what we've also seen is if you instead rely on the hardware UUID, we've seen where people clone VMs, and I'm not sure if this is a responsibility of the hypervisor or something about their virtualization system doesn't reset the hardware UUIDs. So often using the hardware UUIDs is a good alternative to using the UUIDs stored in the Osquery database, but not always, because sometimes you have the equivalent problem, but it's just that the hardware UUID was cloned.
I don't think the hardware UUID will change. It's cached in the database.
That's not my experience.
I can point you at the source code.
Are you? Maybe you should. I don't know why this works for us. I'll have a look at the source code. Yeah, I mean, let's look. We've solved this problem by doing this in the past, or doing something similar to this.
So we have solved some of our. Okay, so we've solved some of our problem because at this point we encode the epoch in the node key. So we will know if any logs come in are from an earlier instance.
So
So one of the things maybe I'm nosing around is when people think about node re-enrollment, right? When the server issues a node must re-enroll response, how do people think about that? Because I think as implemented, it is effectively key rotation. It's not like drop your database and come back again. And I think that difference is interesting because there are times like as a TLS server right now, I find I actually don't really care about key rotation, right? The secret's on disk. Like key rotation is not really part of my threat model here, but I do care about saying, you're just invalid, please throw your database away and come back new. But that's not what enrollment does. Forcing a re-enrollment keeps the same database, it just drops the node key in because of the re-enroll cycle. So there's like a missing TLS response call of hey, please come back again. Just wipe yourself and come back new.
I definitely wouldn't object to having that functionality. I mean, I think part of the reason why you would not reset
want
the
it to be like
database
an option.
Yeah. As I would definitely support that being an option. I mean, I think because the reason why you would not drop the database is you don't want all the new differential results or whatever. You don't want to lose events that were stored or that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or maybe you do, but like.
And if you do, then providing that option, in the enrollment response would be fine, or in some other endpoint would be fine with me. Like I definitely don't object to someone implementing that as a step towards addressing these kind of things.
And yeah, I've just been digging around this and being like, what? There are bugs. There are logic bugs in how this was designed. And the other thing that I think I can't stress strongly enough is that, and I don't know how to get there cleanly because, changing API protocols is very hard. But the only piece of information a node gets at enroll time is private. And that was probably a mistake. That should have been a public-private pair.
I don't object to changing something with that either.
It's just hard because like we have to think about how to change it in a backwards compatible way. So I don't have a particularly actionable thing here. So kind of just wanted to mutter about this aloud. Zach, I will find you the bit of code where I swear hardware UUID is being cached. I think I only have it in an internal collide ticket, but I can fish it out.
Got it. My memory is there is some caching around this, but it's like depends on maybe which code path you take and whether things are available or something. And maybe it doesn't make sense.
I think there's some things that don't make sense.
I'm not going to defend it. Yeah.
Where is this code?
I have it. Yeah, I can link it actually.
Did you find the place where we cache hardware UUID?
Yeah. So
I knew I found it.
But I didn't link the line anyway. That's the file. Sorry, I will also put the line. There are two places maybe to look at. So where it is generated is at that line. The function is generate host UUID, but then the output of that is cached here.
Yeah.
Later.
This is all the stuff I was digging at the other day.
Oops.
So it's just weird, right? Totally weird. I can open a bug about this.
Okay. So the result of that, yeah.
Sorry. So then is what's the second one?
Yeah. Where it is stored in the database under the host UUID v3 host underscore UUID underscore v3 key in the RocksDB database.
Okay, right. It's pulled out of the database. And then, what function does the like system info table or whatever table includes?
It calls these.
Yeah. Which one of these is it called though?
To get it, I think you're asking that. It's the same, like it's get host UUID. It's like the function, the second link. Those lines are in that function. That function also decide either to get the value from the database or to generate a new one with the generate function.
Oh yeah, it calls get host UUID, which is this caching one. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah. That doesn't make a ton of sense to me.
Oh, good. So glad.
It makes me wonder why or how we've fixed issues in the past by doing this.
Well, so I think again we discussed this a bit on the duplicate. So I don't think there is any way to really identify. Obviously, again. So the thing is that we have to remember that there is no real way to identify univocally a a system, given that there are all those things that you can do to keep, like, to have Osquery generate the same ID, like even the so again, the hardware UID, this is not updated always from depending on hypervisor, so you have a problem there. The host name might be the same between clone VMs, so again, that's another issue. And yes, Osquery, it is storing that data, but it's I think it is storing it because, again, you can see for some reason the end user updating that UUID, and then suddenly the machine is different, but it's really not. They have only changed the UUID of their VM.
There's a like almost philosophical question here about what defines a unique computer.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Like
I think at the core,
the ship of Theseus.
My assertion is that the hardware UUID should be the hardware UUID, and yes, if you change the logic board out, you get a new one.
But the VM, if it's a VM, there's no logic board change.
It's just it's an example, right? If you have a VM and you poke the button that says "make this different," it should be different.
I mean, maybe there should be two columns, like a cached UUID and the real one. But I think that the table should report what the system actually has set for the UUID.
I think a cached one doesn't make sense. Well, so I think a cached hardware UUID smells an awful lot like the Osquery identifier, which should be cached and tied to a random number. Like that's just a random identifier tied to the database.
Right.
So like that obviously makes sense to me. Created.
Oh yeah, and sorry, I think the problem is you can't query for that Osquery identifier. I think
you can query for it. You can query for it.
It's in, or is it in the Osquery info table?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. So that's not a problem.
Yeah, Alessandro, absolutely. If you change the logic boards, you'll get a new hardware UUID. But I think that's what you get. Like I don't think Osquery should try and correct for that.
Oh yeah, what I also meant is that you can get your UID zeroed.
So there's a collision and you have duplicates. Yeah.
Like the only number that I think Osquery is responsible for is the Osquery identifier. And I think that should be a random number at database creation time. And it is. Like there's not, that's the only thing that I think kind of makes sense here. Although if there's no hardware UUID, you get a random number that Osquery generates and caches in the database. Okay, I will open a ticket about this, and I don't think anyone will do anything, but at least it'll be there. Thank you all for indulging me in my "how did this ever work" nonsense. Next item, endpoint security-based FIM tables.
Yeah, I added this. I'll open up Blueprint issue, of course, but I quickly wanted to put this up, give some context, and gather some thoughts.
What are we doing today?
What's that?
Do we have FIM capability on OS X today?
No, we do not. This will bring it to parity with
Great.
Linux. The only issue is the notify open event is a bit of a fire hose. And I'm getting 1 million events a minute. It pegs the CPU, memory usage is going up. No matter how much you tune the watchdog, it's gonna impact people when they start using it. And it's only the open event that is kind of an outlier here. So my thoughts are, should we just not support the notify open, or should we have a flag that says, I understand the risk, please allow
Why would you want
events.
notify open for FIM?
What's that?
Why would you need notify open for FIM?
Because Linux also reports on open syscall. Audit does if you configure
open,
it.
Yeah. So
But that's sort of an audit framework, not a FIM framework.
Yeah.
If I think about parlance, I think of FIM as being create, write, delete, not access. And I assume
Okay.
open is primarily access driven.
Yeah, like that's like Apple's like internal classification. Like here are like file events, here are like process events, here are like whatever. Open is helpful in threat hunting and all that, and reverse engineering, but it's I don't think we'll be able to keep up, and I think it'll result in more issues and troubleshooting and support.
Is in terms of general capabilities.
Yeah.
So not so much about your direct proposal here. Given that it is sometimes useful, how could anyone filter it? Like, is there the ability to filter this meaningfully? Like, how can this ever work for anyone?
So there is a path muting API that endpoint security supports, which sort of works if you like cover everything under system, cover everything under library, whatever. It does tone it down, but our implementation is we have one publisher, multiple subscribers, and we may not want that muting for ES process events, and that would require a little bit of unknown territory. Apple usually wants like one ES client per process, so we can have like another publisher which is kind of disjointed from the endpoint security publisher, but then we have two endpoint security clients, and I'm not sure if that's gonna fly. So one approach is we can just do create, write, truncate, whatever, rename whatever events, other events which are not a problem, and not support open, and figure this out at a later time. And
I vote for that.
Okay, cool.
I just am noting that there's documentation for file accesses on Linux, and the documentation says may incur unexpected and unwanted performance overhead. So it gives me the suspicion that it's not reasonable to use on Linux. I don't know if anyone has experience of folks doing file access monitoring on Linux, but it gives me the suspicion that it probably doesn't work well. Although maybe it sounds like on Linux, there's perhaps you can do an inclusion list rather than an exclusion list, which is what you're describing for what the APIs support on macOS, Charvel.
Yeah. If there was a way to tell like endpoint security, hey, these are the only paths kind of interested in, then it would filter out and work a lot better performance-wise, but there isn't at this point.
I would say, I mean, it sounds like if we wanted to support file auditing, file access auditing, we would have to come up with some kind of framework to handle like mute things the first time we see them, and then unmute them if we think we should be paying attention. And like it sounds like you're proposing we build basic FIM functionality for parity, and let's not make our problem harder.
That sounds great. I like it. And I know we are out of time, so I'll like quickly touch on, we briefly chatted about this stuff, about app sources and yum sources, what's considered POSIX now that we don't have FreeBSD. My goal here is to kind of remove tables that don't work or clutter and kind of improve the end user experience a little bit. Dpackage does work on macOS, but apt and yum do not.
Why don't they?
I think that's not like, so the maintainer of dpackage goes to great lengths to make it work on Solaris and macOS and AIX.
So the libraries don't work, and
Yeah.
you don't want to deal with. Okay, I mean that's fine. The libraries don't work.
Yeah. So
the RPM one doesn't, or are we not? Sorry, because like I think I have RPM on my Mac.
I haven't tried it recently, but the apt one definitely does not. Dpackage one does, even on recent macOS.
I think I would say that I'm in favor of anything that feels like it works, we may as well leave, because like in theory, someone might use these. But if the underlying library just doesn't compile, then I wouldn't go jousting at that windmill.
Sounds good.
Anything else? Okay. Thank you all for staying late. I will try and circle back and comment on some tickets and open some issues with various things.
Thanks, everyone. Great discussions today.
Yeah, productive meeting. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Bye.